weeks searching several sites. They've identified at least 2 which show underground anomalies consistent with mass graves. The next step is to finish the scanning and then excavation. 23 years ago, I traveled to Tulsa to report on the efforts of its black community to memorialize the massacre. In 1996, the last of the survivors were still alive. George Monroe was playing with his friend next door when he first smelled the smoke and saw the white mob come over the horizon.
I never will forget some things that I saw, even though I was 5 years old.
Monroe's mother hid him and his sisters under the big bed.
The guys with the torches did come into the house, and after they came in and set the curtains on fire, they were leaving, and one stepped on my finger out on the edge of the bed. And I was just about to holler and scream when my older sister that was next to me put a hand over my mouth. Now, I remember this as if it was yesterday.
George Monroe and his family survived the massacre. He died in 2001. But in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the struggle to acknowledge what happened on June 1st, 1921 is still very much alive. Wade Goodwin, NPR News, Tulsa.
The FBI is facing more blowback over its surveillance of former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page. This time, the criticism comes from the secretive court that oversees foreign intelligence surveillance. It's accusing the FBI of misleading the court when seeking approval for surveillance on Page. We're joined now by NPR Justice correspondent Ryan Lucas. Welcome back to the studio.
Thank you.
What did the court have to say in this order today?
Well, first off, it's incredibly rare to hear anything from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. And this is the court that basically signs off on surveillance of Americans for intelligence surveillance purposes. It operates very much behind closed doors. So any public order is really a big deal. And in this case, we're talking about a 4-page order from the court's chief judge. Her name is Rosemary Collier. And she has some pretty sharp criticism for the FBI over its applications for surveillance on Page. She says the court makes its decisions based on facts submitted by the FBI. And in the case of Page, she says the FBI misled the court. It withheld information. Its applications were riddled with errors. The Bureau, she says, has a duty to be fully forthcoming with the court. And in Page's case, the FBI's actions were antithetical, she says, to that duty. In fact, its handling calls into question information in other FBI applications, is what the chief judge says. So she's ordering the government to say what it has done so far and what it plans to do to ensure that this does not happen again. And she's given the government a January 10th deadline to do so.
Why is this all happening now?
So remember, the Justice Department's Inspector General released his big report on the early stages of the Russia investigation last week. A big part of that looked at the FBI's surveillance of Page. And the Inspector General documented 17 significant errors or omissions in the FBI's applications for surveillance on Page. The FBI, for example, did not inform Justice Department lawyers who oversee this whole process of information that undercut the case for surveillance on Page. A few days later, the Senate Judiciary Committee held a hearing on the Inspector General's report. Republicans and Democrats right now, of course, don't agree on a whole lot. One thing that they did agree on in this hearing, though, people on both sides of the aisle, was the need to look at possible changes to the process for getting the court's approval for foreign intelligence surveillance.
So you have the Inspector General's report and then criticism from lawmakers and now word from the FISA court itself. Are we likely to see changes in the law?
You know, it's hard to say right now. It is still very early in this process. The Inspector General's report just came out last week. But certainly advocates for change are eager to seize on this opportunity right now. The American Civil Liberties Union said that Congress has to radically reform this process to increase accountability. They say that the whole process for getting surveillance from this court, as it stands right now, is really ripe for abuse. But national security folks say that this surveillance power is critical for the FBI. It's critical in both counterintelligence and counterterrorism cases. But nobody is defending the errors and mistakes that were made in the case of Carter Page and documented in the Inspector General's report. FBI Director for Christopher Wray said that he accepts the Inspector General's findings. Ray says he's already vowed to make changes to how the FBI handles its applications for this kind of surveillance in order to make sure that the information that the FBI is providing the court is completely accurate and is complete. There has been rumbling, of course, from the Hill, as I said earlier, to make changes, but it really is too early at this point to say whether that will reach the critical mass to actually get something done.
That's NPR Justice Correspondent Ryan Lucas. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is NPR News.
When it comes to your child's prospects, neighborhood matters.
It's the social fabric of the neighborhood that helped us raise our children.
But a wide racial divide in most urban areas means more opportunity for some kids than others, even just a few blocks down the street. In one part of Albany, New York, some residents are trying to change that. On the next morning edition from NPR News.
Tomorrow morning from 5 to 9 here on WKAR.
All Things Considered on WKAR is supported by listeners like you. And the Community Foundation, a charitable organization committed to serving donors, supporting local nonprofits, and leading projects to create vibrant communities in the Capital Region. Information at ourcommunity.org.
In your Capital Region weather forecast, snow showers will be likely tonight with cloudy skies, then gradually clearing overnight with lows around 15 degrees. News is next. It's 6:30.
It's All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Ari Shapiro.
And I'm Audie Cornish. Next, how a Ukrainian prosecutor helped ignite the impeachment of Donald Trump.
It was almost as if, if he had been invited to a few more holiday parties at the embassy, none of this would have happened.
Plus poetry for the time of year when nights are at their longest.
Now, this news.
Live from NPR News in Culver City, California, I'm Duali Saikautau. At the Capitol, tense negotiations continue between House Democrats and Republicans over the rules of debate for tomorrow's historic impeachment vote. Meanwhile, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said the impeachment vote is a political decision, not a judicial one, adding that he's not an impartial juror. That prompted Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer of New York to say this.
He was asked if he was an impartial juror. He seemed to proudly say no. I would ask every one of our Republican colleagues, do you want someone who proudly says they are not impartial to be on a jury judging high crimes and misdemeanors, serious charges against the President of the United States?
That's Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. Healthcare.gov, the federal marketplace for buying individual health insurance under the Affordable Care Act, is back open. That's after technical difficulties over the weekend. NPR's Selena Simmons-Duffin reports this temporary extension ends tomorrow at 3 a.m. Eastern.
This new extra window to enroll in coverage is brief, only 36 hours, and the government is not doing a very good job of spreading the word. The banner on the website healthcare.gov continued to say open enrollment was over, well after the extension was announced. And government tweets and statements imply that only people who had begun applications can enroll. That's not true. New consumers can begin applications and enroll right now. Healthcare.gov is a signature creation of Obamacare, which President Trump has predicted would collapse. That hasn't happened. More than 11 million people got their 2019 health coverage through the insurance marketplaces. Selena Simmons-Duffin, NPR News.
At the close of Wall Street, the Dow was up 31 points. This is NPR.
For WKAR News, I'm Karel Vega. Michigan has filed a lawsuit seeking damages from drug companies that distribute opioid painkillers. As Capitol Bureau Chief Rick Pluto reports, the lawsuit claims the companies did not take necessary precautions despite knowing the dangers posed by opioids.
A 1992 state law allows prosecutors to recover damages from drug dealers. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel says that law also allows the state to collect damages from drug companies. The lawsuit targets 4 pharmaceutical distribution companies. Nessel says those companies are responsible for their products being abused.
They knowingly and deliberately distributed drugs in our state without controls. This was not only negligent, It was unlawful.
Nessel says now the companies owe Michigan taxpayers the costs of treating people who become addicted to opioids. One of the drug companies released a statement saying its products are FDA approved and prescribed for patients by physicians. I'm Rick Pluta in Lansing.
President Donald Trump will be campaigning in Michigan tomorrow on the same day Congress debates impeaching him. President Trump, Vice President Mike Pence, and Attorney General William Barr will all be in the state on Wednesday. Governor Gretchen Whitmer does not see a problem with the spotlight on Michigan, even with the impeachment debate going on in Washington, D.C.
The world's going to be watching Michigan, and you know what? That's a good thing.
Whitmer says she expects the rally in Battle Creek will show strong support for the president, but she adds that in other parts of the state there are people with an opposite opinion. A wide-ranging cleanup of the Great Lakes would receive a funding boost under a spending bill moving toward enactment in Congress. The measure approved today by the House includes $320 million for the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. The bill was sent to the Senate for a vote expected later this week. The initiative received $475 million in 2010 and about $300 million annually since. It pays for projects dealing with long-term environmental problems like toxic pollution in harbors and river mouths. You're listening to WKAR, your NPR station for the Capital Region. More state news is at WKAR.org.
All Things Considered on WKAR is supported by listeners like you.
And by MESA, a not-for-profit association providing healthcare plans to Michigan school employees for more than 50 years. MESA keeps Michigan school employees healthy and on the job so they can help students succeed. MESA.org.
Right now, 29 degrees in East Lansing, 30 in Jackson, and 29 in Charlotte. It's 6:35.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from the Pajamagram Company, offering Hoodie Footy PJs, footed pajamas for warmth and personal style, in solids, holiday prints, and Nordic fleece. More at pajamagram.com. From Trader Joe's, where holiday products like Scandinavian Tidings and Candy Cane JoJo's are available in stores, and episodes of Inside Trader Joe's are available at traderjoes.com and wherever podcasts are found. And from Americans for the Arts.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Ari Shapiro.
And I'm Audie Cornish. As the House prepares to vote tomorrow on the impeachment of President Trump, we're going to look at the one person whose name is cited in the inquiry more often than almost any other. It's not Trump or even his personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, who went to Ukraine to seek dirt on Trump's political rivals. It's one of the people Giuliani met there, the former prosecutor general of Ukraine, Yuri Lutsenko. That observation comes from the Ukrainian prosecutor behind Trump's impeachment. It's the title of the latest story by Adam Entis of The New Yorker. He joins us now to talk more about it. Welcome.
It's great to be here.
Before we get to why Lutsenko is so vital to the impeachment, can you give us a little bit of his biography? He's got a long history in Ukrainian politics, right?
Lutsenko was, as a younger man, helped lead some of the early revolutions in the country. He went on to become interior minister and was hailed by the U.S. Embassy and by the FBI as one of the country's honest cops. There was a lot of optimism about his future in the country.
So what happened? Because by 2016, he's the prosecutor general, and the U.S. wants him to root out corruption and self-dealing among Ukraine's leaders. And it seems like that's not the way it works out. The former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, talks about this goal in her public testimony before the House Intelligence Committee.
I did not tell Mr. Lutsenko or other Ukrainian officials who they should or should not prosecute. Instead, I advocated the U.S. position that rule of law should prevail.
What was the relationship between Yovanovitch and Lutsenko, and why is it key to the impeachment inquiry?
Well, that clip is a reference to their first meeting, which takes place in October 2016. The way it was described by Ukrainian officials who were present was Lutsenko basically said that there were some anti-corruption activists who were supported by the Americans, who he reserved the right to investigate and prosecute. And according to Lutsenko and his aides who were there, The ambassador, Yovanovitch, was unhappy with that and expressed concern that doing so was not what his office really should be doing, that they should be investigating actual corruption instead of harassing anti-corruption activists. And that sort of set the tone, frankly, for the entire relationship between them. They became, largely enemies and could barely meet together, at least according to Lutsenko's account. And the embassy cut him off. And he became embittered and was looking for a way to, improve his standing in Washington. And to find a way to do so meant looking for people that he could meet with besides Ambassador Yovanovitch.
And the person he found was the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani. Did Lutsenko, in your conversation, take credit, so to speak, for helping to usher out this ambassador? How did he talk about his relationship with Giuliani in relation to that?
So his version, which I think is accurate, is that when he went to go meet with Giuliani, he knew that Giuliani wanted to talk about the Bidens. But his version is that he didn't know that they wanted to talk about Yovanovitch. Now, he had plenty of things to say about Yovanovitch when Giuliani raised her name. And then he contributed, with dirt that he had and all this bile that he had in his built up over time towards her, which he shared with Giuliani. And when she was removed, he said he was pleased with the result.
Considering the ripple effects of all of these meetings and all of these situations, it sounds kind of horrifyingly personal. Considering what's at stake.
Yeah. I mean, I was struck by, kind of the ego and what happens when somebody who's very proud of themselves, and part of that is justified, feels like their ego's been bruised. I mean, that's what happened with Lutsenko. Also, I was amazed by how really petty the disputes were. Kind of reminded me of any office politics, frankly, where, he was jealous of a rival, domestic rival, who was getting more adoration from Yovanovitch than he was getting. It was almost as if, if he had been invited to a few more holiday parties at the embassy, none of this would have happened. For him, obviously, it's not petty. For him, it became, in his mind, existential because he realized that his political future, was being held back because the Americans distrusted him so much.
Giuliani was just in Ukraine recently, met with Lutsenko. Are they still at it? Are they still trying to investigate President Trump's Democratic rivals?
I don't know if investigate's the right word for what they're doing. They're having meetings. He did have meetings with several former Ukrainian officials that have provided him with information that has almost no credibility. I think Giuliani's strategy here is to put it out there and hope that a good percentage or some percentage of the American population will believe it's true or at least be confused, so confused that they won't necessarily pay as much attention as they might to the allegations that are being made against the president for his conduct in Ukraine.
That's Adam Entis, staff writer for The New Yorker. His story about Yuri Lutsenko is in the December 23rd issue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Now to Jersey City and the funeral for the police detective who was killed last week just before the attack on a kosher market. NPR's Jeff Brady reports police from around the region lined the streets today to pay their respects.
It's a cold, wet day in Jersey City. A police procession with hundreds of officers escorted Detective Joseph Seal's coffin from a funeral home to St. Aidan's Church. As the coffin was moved along the street, honor guards on the sidewalk raised their flags, and officers with white gloves saluted. Arriving at the church, bagpipes played as mourners went inside for the funeral mass. Patrolman Frank Steinhauser is here with colleagues from the North Plainfield, New Jersey Police Department.
I'm thinking about the officer who was murdered in the line of duty by a terrorist. 2 terrorists.
Federal authorities call this a case of domestic terrorism and say the attackers appeared to be motivated by a hatred for Jews and the police. Among those watching the procession, Natalie Miranda works nearby and says she noticed there was a big security presence, including officers patrolling with large guns.
There's SWAT, there's dogs, extra precautions today. I know that one of the cops had told me just, keep an eye out today and try to be careful.
Nearby and standing under an umbrella, Jersey City resident Michelle Maddie says she's thinking about Detective Seal's wife and 5 children.
It's just so sad. It really is, because I have
5 children of my own, and, to be, for his life to be cut so short like that, it's just sad. It really is, I feel really bad for his family, and I hope they do all they can for his family.
An online fundraiser brought in more than $570,000 by this afternoon. Another organization is paying off the family's mortgage. Meantime, the investigation into Seal's death and the attack on the kosher market continues. Investigators are holding back some details, but we know that he was at a cemetery a week ago. Authorities say the attackers killed Seals first and then went to the kosher market, killing 3 more people. The shooters died after a gun battle with police. Authorities say more details will be made public later. Today, a police department from a nearby town patrolled Jersey City, so officers here could spend the day remembering their colleague. Jeff Brady, NPR News, Jersey City.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
Earlier this year, Lauren Freyer, our correspondent based in India, heard something in southern India that stuck with her ever since. A part of a conversation that never made it into a radio story, but has haunted her since she recorded it. Now, all this week, we're asking our international correspondents to bring us scenes that hit the cutting room floor, but that they haven't been able to shake. My co-host Elsa Chang spoke with Lauren Freyer, and a quick note before we get started. This story details an account of sexual assault.
So, tell us a little bit about how you ended up in this scene that we're going to hear. Who is it that we are going to be learning from today?
You're going to hear from Alex Thomas. He's a 37-year-old Christian man from southern India, and I met him while reporting a story about a Catholic bishop who's currently on trial here in India for allegedly raping a nun. And Alex's wife is another alleged victim. She says that she was molested and raped by her parish priest. She eventually confided in another priest that this abuse was going on, and then he, the second priest, allegedly took advantage of her too. And so she got caught in this cycle of abuse and blackmail and silence, which subsequently affected her whole family.
Okay, let's take a listen to the conversation that you had with Alex. Just so everyone knows, we're not going to be using the victim's name or voice. This is her husband.
And she was very afraid, and he told, if you tell this to someone else, nobody will believe you.
And he's a priest.
He's a priest.
Are you still a believer?
100%. I believe in God. 100% I believe in God. See, it's not because of the church, the person is guilty, but not the church actually. I know these people are very powerful. I'm a village man, I don't have big dreams. I have small dreams. My dreams are my...
It's really hard to listen to him. Can you tell us, what was it about this interaction that stuck with you all year?
For me, Alex's story is a reminder that sex abuse hurts entire families. I mean, I wasn't even talking to the victim herself, and you can hear Alex...
Welcome to the East Lansing City Council meeting, regular meeting of December 17th. Can the clerk call the roll?
Councilmember Babcock? Present. Councilmember Gregg?
Here.
Councilmember Meadows?
Here.
Pro Tem Stevens?
Here.
And Mayor Byer.
The next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion on that?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any items that anybody would like off? Oh, sorry. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion on the regular city council meeting December 3rd?
Yes. Move it. So moved.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Next item on the agenda is city council discussion only meeting minutes for December 10th.
So moved.
I'll second that too.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Seeing none. The next item on the agenda is written communications. This is an announcement. All written communications received by the council are linked on our agenda packet online, as well as sent out. If there are any items that were not relayed towards on this written communication, please let me know, and I will get an answer to why that was occurring or get that on the written communications. Our next item on the agenda is communications from the audience. This is a time set aside for anybody to talk to us about any issue that is on or off the agenda tonight. There are some public hearings on the agenda later tonight, but if you would like to talk now rather than later, please feel free to do so. I have 2 blue cards. I will call those up. We have Jim Anderson. Welcome, Jim.
Good evening. Jim Anderson, 968 Roxburgh. First, congratulations to our new council members. I wish you well, and I wish our city well. I put down my topic as streets, TIFs, and DDA, and I should have added a note that just said maybe all this and more in 5 minutes. I'm speaking personally on behalf of a friend, a very dear friend, injured by an intersection near downtown. Let's simply call my friend Elizabeth. Let's name the intersection. It's the pothole-ridden intersection of Collingwood and Butterfield. It's exactly 0.3 of a mile from University Place, better known as the Marriott Hotel. And if you look carefully through the trees, you can sometimes see the upper part of the hotel from right along Collingwood near this intersection. That's relevant to where I'll go later. Elizabeth is a member of my church, Edgewood UCC. She's been a friend since my undergrad years at MSU. I got acquainted with her first because her husband taught one of my undergrad classes here at MSU. She's now a widow. Her husband died about a year ago or so. Elizabeth is a pretty avid walker, and she often bikes to church from her residence along Butterfield. 2 weeks ago, Elizabeth sprained her ankle in the Butterfield and Collingwood intersection. A week ago, in church, we got the announcement that Elizabeth wasn't there because she had fallen again in the intersection, and as it turned out, she had broken and dislocated her wrist. Another devoted member of the congregation was helped get her to urgent care and stayed with her till about 2 a.m. that night. That's the street side. I felt immediately and instinctively angered at this story, partly because Elizabeth is a widow. She doesn't need this kind of injury. Nobody does, but she especially, as she begins the recovery from the death of her husband. But it happened twice in barely 7 days. Now, what struck me about this is that this happened practically within sight, as I said, geographically 3/10 of a mile from the Marriott Hotel. The Marriott Hotel receives, well, I shouldn't say they receive, but the city, a city through the tax increment financing system gets just about $160,000 for fiscal 20, varying numbers above and below that for years prior to this. I did a little quick work on this, what's called TIF 1, and it dates from 1986. This TIF ran out after its 30 years of usage, its 30 years of subsidy, its 30 years of denial of that that scale of money to our general fund. That ran out about 2014, and then it's renewed. So University Place, or more specifically the parking lot under it, operates on what amounts now to a 60-year TIF. Elizabeth was injured in part because too much general fund money is being diverted into developer subsidies. We call them TIFs. They can be very, very complicated to understand. I have one PhD, but I feel like I ought to pursue another one just on TIFs. They're not easy to understand, but there are some bottom numbers. 160,000 is one of them. Some portion of that 160,000 channeled through assessments and the general fund to Downtown Development Authority, which I prefer to call the Downtown Developers Alliance, because that's who it too often, too much serves. So there's some portion of that money should have been repairing the street and the intersections basically around Bailey School. I mean, we all know Collingwood and Butterfield is by no means the only rotten intersection in this town. But we need to do much, much better at repairing our streets, at reducing, minimizing the tax increment financing subsidies. The Marriott Hotel chain can buy and sell East Lansing as a municipality with probably a fraction of 1 day's cash flow. But there they are, receiving, I shouldn't say they're receiving, but the city's receiving through them $160,000 a year. And just to put an exclamation point on this, the total property tax capture for the DDA, not even counting the DDA special millage of about $160,000, is about $1,150,000 per year. That would do minimum fixes on a lot of intersections in this town. And I simply want to say, with a lot of pain in my heart, after what Elizabeth has had to go through the last 2 weeks, that this council, this city, has got to do a far, far better job of reducing and minimizing subsidies to developers, most of whom don't even live in this city. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming, Jim. Is there any questions for the speaker?
Sorry, I've been over to pick up your blue cards.
No, it's okay. Jim, just, I might get a response from the city manager. When are we talking about TIF policy? I believe it's in our...
It's the discussion-only meeting in January.
Okay,
we'll have
so
some discussion.
just so you know, in an effort to, and I think this council is encouraging staff to bring issues forward to us to discuss them kind of in public. One of the issues that we're going to be discussing is TIF policy and kind of where this council stands on that.
Okay.
That's going to be at our January 14th discussion-only meeting. I share a lot of your
discussion-only meeting,
yes.
not a regular council.
No, not a regular meeting where anything would be
Over
voted
the
on.
conference room?
No, held right here in public, and in an effort to kind of talk about these issues up front. And so I do share a lot of your concerns regarding TIF policy, and I'm hoping we have a really robust discussion on that January 14th.
So just note that those meetings are televised as well, so it looks just like a regular meeting, except there's no discussion only, there's no decisions made. So it will be here as well, and you can watch it on
Those
TV as well.
meetings once in a while, so I understand that part of the format.
Great.
I didn't know that they were now televised.
They are televised. You can watch them streaming platform as well.
Councilor Venice.
Yeah, Jim, I'll also mention that I think 2 years ago, we made a substantial change to TIF policy so far after this 2014 extension of this, and the BRA also changed their policy, as I recall, to conform to the city's policy, which limits the use of TIF in a substantial way.
Well, that's good. That's progress, because I think that the TIF policy as it operated for almost a decade helped drive this city into its financial hole.
Thank you for coming, Jim. The next card that I have is Alice Strager regarding the historic district boundary, I assume for Oakwood.
I would just bring your attention to the fact on the TIF policy that it actually has a total out built into it that says if you decide that there's some public good, you don't have to pay attention to what the policy says. So you might revisit that. I'm speaking just as a homeowner and a leader in the Oakwood neighborhood on the historic district issue. First, the item in the consent agenda says that there will be notice to affected properties, but I've heard from neighbors who say they haven't received notice, so I'm not sure who is being notified. The other thing is that I think it's important for the city to recognize that affected properties are not only the people who are within the historic district, it's the people who border the historic district, because the whole point of the district is to create protection zones. So, for example, one of the people that has written to you previously, Robert Mavrogodato, lives at 600 Rosewood Avenue. He lives exactly on the border, but on the other side of the border, so his house is directly impacted by border changes. Secondly, I just want to make clear something that maybe isn't clear. The Oakwood Historic District, as I understand it, was created in 1989. Almost all of us who now live in the district bought our houses knowing we were buying into a historic district. When we did that, we were buying into certain protections. And so I recognize that the council is looking at the question of Mr. Pirelli's properties and the co-op who want to be out of the district. But the rest of us specifically bought into the district, understanding ourselves to be purchasing properties, homes, in a district that was of a certain size, and that we would not be closer to the edge of the borders than we currently are. If you reduce the borders, you change our property rights, basically. We didn't find ourselves in a situation that some people do with overlay districts, with rental overlay districts, where they bought into something and now the neighborhood wants to change the rules. We bought in knowing what the rules were. And if you reduce the borders on our district, you're reducing our ability to protect our neighborhood. So just as an example, one of the letters that you also received was from Ann Nichols, who lives at 526 Forest Street. Ann Nichols can, from her front porch, see the Pirelli properties on the co-op. And this is true for some others of our neighbors. So if now you allow those properties to come out and it becomes very easy to redevelop them into something possibly not so attractive as the houses that are there, you're directly affecting the experience of the people who bought homes and put a lot of money into these homes over the years. So I just wanted to point that out. This is not about landmark status. So when I see you specifically picking out the sorority on Oak Hill, that's what you're supposed to do with landmark status. That's not districts. And if you read the SHPO letter, you will see SHPO tried very hard to explain in that letter that the reason the West Village condos, for example, are in our district are because they were built in a way that respects the rest of the properties in the district, and they're supposed to be kept in order to protect the district as a whole. Third, I just had a question, and this is the last thing I'm going to just ask. Tom Fehrenbach has referenced a couple times that even if you don't change the border of the Oakwood Historic District, you need to pass a new ordinance because the old ordinance is wrong in some way, that it doesn't correctly state the borders of the district. I've asked a couple times, so what's the error? And I can't get an answer. I'd like to know what the borders of my district are now and what's wrong with them. I'm curious.
Could we please get a response on that question?
Mr. Fehrenbach up to answer the question.
Thank you very much.
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Just right after he answers the question, I will.
I apologize, I got in late because the parking stanchion wouldn't take my credit card.
I apologize about that.
Good evening. So the issue with the current legal description is that it is inaccurate. So it describes, for instance, some boundaries that cannot exist, such as, I believe, Albert Avenue to Grand River Avenue, which is impossible. So if you'd like to keep the district as it's currently mapped, we'll need to make those modifications to the legal description so that it's accurate.
Okay, and then I have a follow-up question for you.
Sure.
This was an issue that was brought up kind of last meeting and through some email chains, and since we do have 2 new council members and we are re-bringing up an issue that was discussed back in March, is there any way that we could get some of that information or the public comment portion or some of that written communication to our new council members on this subject very specifically? Because I know we had discussed bringing out the park and the DDA properties beforehand. We had received a good amount of public comment on it. So just because a couple of the members weren't there during that discussion, I think it'd be good for them to have that info.
Sure. So, I mean, our typical protocol is that items received by the city council are posted on your agenda packet, and they're there just like they are tonight for perpetuity. And then items that are received as part of the planning commission process or directly to staff are then added into the staff's file where we keep those and we place those in the packet. So
I understand completely, and this is kind of an irregular situation because it was addressed before and now we're re-bringing it up after an election. So I normally would never ask something like this, but if there maybe it could just be some information to the new council members on where they could find that info, that'd serve as.
Certainly, and I think as part of the last item for your discussion only, we put a link to the May agenda because there were also other historic districts boundary studies there. Yeah. But we can also provide a link to the previous item in March or in April as well, where there's some additional comments.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I know that we had one more person. If you would like to approach the podium, and if you could fill out a blue card at some point, you can do that after you speak. Just for the
James Robertson, 815 Sunset Lane. I'm here tonight to comment on the proposed ordinances regarding the proposed revisions to the boundary of the Oakwood Historic District. You already clarified one point about the legal description, but I also suggest that in the ordinance you refer to Oakwood, not Collegeville.
That's a good note.
The State Historic Preservation Office, I'll refer to them as the SHPO, comments on the Oakwood Boundary Study Report with which the State of Michigan's Historic Preservation Review Board concurred. They make it very clear that the arguments for boundary changes should be consistent with Public Act 169 of 1970, as amended, and should be clearly stated and justified based on historic and architectural facts and contexts. And while the draft report has its flaws, the city has made no effort whatsoever to revise the draft and prepare an acceptable final report in the year since its submittal. Basing a hearing on a one-year-old draft report is not only inconsistent with Public Act 169 requirements for historic district boundary modifications, but without further work, the report's recommendations cannot stand on their own. This weakens the case for historic preservation in East Lansing and begs the question, How can citizens possibly have confidence in the report and the actions taken to date? To then propose alternative boundaries, as is the case for Ordinance 1446A, and the last-minute insertion into the consent agenda of 1446B, that may make wholesale changes to the integrity, feeling, and character of the Oakwood Historic District, flies in the face of the text, the intent, and the spirit of Public Act 169. It short-circuits the process, and it sets an ugly precedent. The act requires a defensible study of why these properties should be removed in the two ordinances I cited. For someone who voted for greater transparency in city government, I am appalled that the planning department and the city council is even entertaining these ordinances without further study. I also note that the draft report explicitly included the Evergreen and Oak Hill properties and Valley Court Park as integral to the local historic district. The SHPO comments are very clear that they believe that Valley Court Park and other properties are historic. There can be no argument that logically can be made to exclude these areas from the Oakwood Historic District. And yes, the truth can be inconvenient. Just because you can claim public participation, passing an ordinance at a flawed public hearing does not confer legitimacy. I can only conclude, having observed the city planners and city council actions since 2010, that ordinances 1446A and B are proposed solely for the purpose of greasing the skids for public-private development. Lastly, I remind you, Valley Court Park is the property of the citizens of East Lansing. It is not a shiny object to dangle in front of developers who may or may not care about the integrity of our neighborhoods. And while I do not believe anyone would have the audacity to sell or lease the park, what you are doing with this ordinances is selling out. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your comments, sir. I do not have any more blue cards. Does anybody wish to come to the podium and speak? And sir, could you fill out a blue card and just give it to our clerk? All right, one more time, I'm going to ask if anybody wants to comment. All right, seeing none, I will move to the next item on the agenda, which is communications from the mayor and council members. Councilmember Babcock.
I'd like to thank Mr. Anderson for bringing that to our attention. I think I know who he's talking about. It would be terrible if anyone were to have 2 injuries in a week with a parking lot on a public street. If this is the person I know, if this is the person I believe it is, it's especially terrible because I don't think I've ever met such a delightful, vibrant soul who is still dancing into her 80s. And it certainly lays bare the cost of the tax incentives, and for whenever something giveth, something taketh away. And having sprained my wrist falling off a porch while campaigning, I'm still feeling it, and I am especially sorry that she's had both an ankle and a wrist in short order. I'm not springing back the way I used to past 50, but it gets harder over time. So thank you.
Councilmember Gregg.
I'm good.
Councilmember Ramados.
A couple of things. One, I think last week we forgot to thank staff for the great work they did in putting together the Winter Glow in the downtown East Lansing. It's really a staff-operated activity. It's a lot of work and hugely successful and a great event for downtown. So I wanted to indicate that. I'd also like to ask the city attorney to respond a little bit to Mr. Robertson's comments here. I'm looking at Section 14 of the Historic Districts Act, which is MCL 399.214. I'm not reading it quite the way he does, so I would like actually an opinion as to what the city council actually has the authority to do based on that report. Okay.
You want a written opinion?
I would like a written opinion that's shared with council members.
Really
And if we can have it by the time we have this we're having this on the discussion only agenda before we take action on the 21st, right?
I thought it was coming back for action on the 21st, but I did not know it was beyond, but if you requested.
Well, I think because the Mayor Pro Tem asked that the new council members get more information with regard to it, it makes sense for us to have it also on the discussion-only meeting in January. So I'll make that specific request. And then finally, I guess I'd say this is our last meeting of the year, so have yourself a merry little Christmas, everybody, and a great, safe holiday.
I only have a couple of things. There's a CATA resolution on here, notice of street closures. I wanted to just talk about this just for a brief minute. It's on the consent agenda. This came out of a conversation with the chair of the board of CATA and our Human Relations Commission chair, as well as kind of a conversation with a member of the CATA staff. It's a good practice. This is a resolution to notify them of street closures, either emergency and or planned out in advance fairly far. This is a practice we do regularly anyway. There have been occasional street closures throughout the region where CATA doesn't maybe have enough time to change around stops or alert people via their application or others if a stop isn't operational and where they can go further. So it's a fairly simple resolution, but I just wanted to talk about it for a brief minute. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is the MLK resolution that is on our consent agenda. So we have an incredible commission here in the region that has been the longest serving commission honoring Dr. King, hosting the biggest event in the country doing so. That event will be held January 20th at the Lansing Center. This is an event for all of us to honor what was a monumental legacy and continues to affect us to this day. The speaker for the event, which I am very excited about, is the incomparable Representative John Lewis, civil rights icon in so many ways, and it just speaks to the volume of respect that the MLK Commission has within the country that he would attend this event. We have had incredible speakers before as well. I've been to the event every year that I possibly can, and it has been great each time. So I just wanted to give a plug for that, and just as a recognition, obviously, of this resolution honoring the legacy of a hero in American history. That is all I've got, besides just saying happy holidays to everybody. And after this meeting, we will see you back next year. Thank you to all of our staff in the Public Works Department as well with dealing with the snowfall and then not snowfall and making sure that our streets are safe, which is very important, as was indicated in a public comment today.
I think we'd be remiss to not thank the city manager for 20 years of service to the city of East Lansing. Thank you. That's quite a milestone.
Thank you.
Congratulations on that.
That's
the next item on our...
when you were 18.
Yeah, it was 12, actually.
The next item on the agenda, speaking of which, is the city manager's report.
Great segue. So we have our annual 2019 annual report, which is the report of our activities over the last year. A lot of good information from our departments, financial information on the back. This also is a 2020 calendar for the community. It has lots of great pictures that are actually taken by community members of our community, so it really is a kind of unique thing unique to East Lansing, showing a lot of great sides of East Lansing. So this is on council's desk. It has a lot of good information for you during the year, but also makes a nice calendar for people to put on their bulletin board, hopefully. We have this available at City Hall, copies for people for free. If you want a copy, please email us, call us, City Manager's Office Communications, and we will mail you a copy for free. So please take advantage of that. We've got lots of copies for people. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the city attorney's report.
Thank you. No report this evening.
Thank you. And the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, and I will hand that over to the city manager.
So we have the following items on the consent agenda. It's a long one, so bear with me. On the consent agenda for council's consideration, Item 3.1, approve the following appointments or reappointments to boards or commissions. A, Michael Townley to the Commission on the Environment for a full term ending December 31st, 2022. B, Wendy Sylvester Rowan to the Arts Commission for a full term expiring December 31st, 2022. C, Abigail Taikaki to the Arts Commission for a full term expiring December 30th, 2022. D, Beth Russell to the Board of Review for a full term ending December 31st, 2022. E, John Munn to the Board of Review for a full term ending December 31st, 2022. F, James Bradley to the Zoning Board of Appeals as an alternate for a full term ending December 31st, 2022. G, Ismat Lal to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a full term ending December 31st, 2022. H, Liz Miller to the Human Relations Commission for a full term ending December 31st, 2022. I, Talise Murray to the Human Relations Commission for a full term ending December 31st, 2022. J, Carla McWhirther to the Human Relations Commission for a full term ending December 31st, 2022. K, Joan Allum to the Senior Commission for a full term ending December 31st, 2022. L, Jean Brisboe to the Senior Commission for a full term ending December 31st, 2022. M, Jack Nolish to the Senior Commission for a full term ending December 31st, 2022. N, Aaron Sousa to the Historic District Commission for a full term ending December 31st, 2023. Letter O, M, Carrie Sampson to the Historic District Commission for a full term ending December 31st, 2023. Letter P, Marcella Fox Brown to the Historic District Commission for a full term ending December 31st, 2023. Q, Colleen DeVries Bird to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a full term ending December 31st, 2022. Letter R, Justin Houston to the East Lansing Downtown Management Board for a full term ending December 31st, 2023. T, Quentin Tyler to the Human Relations Commission for a full term ending December 31st, 2022. U, Tetta Hughes to the Arts Commission for a full term ending December 31st, 2022. And finally, letter V, Alan Conceso to the Art Selection Panel for a term ending December 31st, 2022. Item 3.2, approve policy resolution 2019-5 requiring publication and notification of road closures. Item 3.3, approve a resolution objecting to the transfer of unsold tax reverted property from the Ingham County Treasurer to the City of East Lansing. Item 3.4, approve a resolution to pay tribute to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s ideals of freedom, justice, and peace. Item 3.5, approve a resolution adopting the 2020 through 2024 Park Recreation and Open Space and Greenways Plan as a guideline for improving parks and recreation services for the residents of the City of East Lansing, and incorporate the plan by reference into the 2018 City of East Lansing Comprehensive Plan, the bigger picture. Item 3.6, approve a contract award to Montgomery Excavating in the amount of $608,800.50 for improvements to White Park. Approve a project contingency of $30,000 and authorize the city manager to sign. Item 3.7, approve an award for the Water Resource Recovery Facility, WRF, for emergency and as-needed instrumentation and controls services contracts to UIS SCADA Incorporated in the amount of $90,000 and authorize the city manager to sign. Item 3.8, approve a contract for the design of Evergreen Avenue utilities with Kebs Incorporated in the amount not to exceed $90,000 and authorize the city manager to sign. Item 3.9, authorize Michigan State University Federal Credit Union to submit a site plan and special use permit application for a potential redevelopment of the city-owned parking lot number 4 at Albert Avenue and Abbott Road. Item 3.10, approve a date change for the public hearing on Ordinance 1462, originally scheduled for December 17, 2019, to be moved to January 21st, 2020. Item 3.11, extend the approval period for the Oakwood Historic District Boundary Study and defer consideration of Ordinance 1446, 1446A, and 1446B from December 17, 2019 to January 21, 2020, with appropriate notifications to affected properties. Item 3.12, set a public hearing for January 21, 2020 to consider a site plan and special use permit application from Core Campus Manager, LLC, for the properties at 131, 135 207, 217, and 227 Bogue to demolish all the existing buildings on the site and construct a 14-story, 720-unit multifamily development in 2 separate buildings, each at 152 feet tall, including amenities for the residents and structured parking for 400 vehicles. Item 3.13, set a public hearing for January 21, 2020 to consider an application for site plan and special use permit approval from Rockwood Development Group LLC for the properties at 6290, 6330, 6350, and vacant land Abbott Road to develop a 3-phase development consisting of an assisted living and memory care building, independent living villas, and a 4-story independent living building. Those are all the items on the consent agenda for council's consideration.
Thank you, City Manager, and I'll ask Councilmember Meadows to return. Would anybody like any of these items moved off the consent agenda to our business agenda? Seeing none, I look for a motion on the consent agenda.
I'll move approval of the consent agenda with one amendment, which is to add the reappointment of Kathleen Boyle, Chris Wolf, and Dale Downs to the Planning Commission for full terms expiring in whatever 3 years from now is, 2022, I guess it would be.
Okay, is there a second?
I actually have another addition as well.
All right, well, this would need I believe, a second or a friendly amendment for.
Just do a friendly amendment.
Friendly amendment to also reappoint Susan Woods to the Art Selection Committee.
For a term expiring.
That I would have to check my email for a full term.
Determined by staff. How's
Yes,
that?
for a full term as determined by staff.
City Attorney, is that all clear?
That'll work.
Okay. Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second.
All right, with a motion and a second, is there any discussion on the item? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. And the consent agenda is passed.
Can I ask one question regarding that portion of the agenda? I just want to confirm that the public hearing on January 21st for the Oakwood Historic District, that will be a public hearing, right? In other words, the notifications that go out would go out like a normal public hearing would.
Did we already do the public hearing for that purpose?
I mean, normally this would go on a business agenda,
Yeah.
but we had such an extensive period of time. I just want to make sure that we plan a very vigorous public notice with regard to this.
Yes, so technically it's not a public hearing, but we are planning to notice it as though it's a public hearing with softened language as was requested.
Okay, sounds good. All right, thanks.
Yep.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda are public hearings. So we've got item number 4.1, consideration of a modified site plan and special use permit application for the properties at 100 West Grand River, 120 through 140 West Grand River Avenue, and 341 through 345 Evergreen Avenue for a 5-story residential building with one level of parking, including a mix of apartment types ranging from studios to 3-bed units. This is a public hearing, so if you would like to speak on this issue, please feel free to come forward to the podium.
And that is that someday we change how we talk about stories in East Lansing. So could we please work on talking about stories the way we all count them, which is numbers of floors? It's really confusing to explain to people that there's a 10-story building that's 13 stories high if it has 3 floors of parking.
Sure. I actually don't disagree with that.
I also think it would be great if building height was the actual building height and not the building height plus we don't count fitness centers on the top. So I think it's time for East Lansing to recognize stories as stories and feet as feet.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anybody else that would like to comment on this item on the agenda?
David Pearson on behalf of the applicant, and I guess is this where you would like to hear from us? I don't know if you're going to have a report from staff.
I was going to have staff go up, and then if there are questions, have the.
We'll
but you are
follow.
more than welcome to speak. This is a
Well,
public hearing.
it's more a question of, I have a full presentation. Do you want it now or do you want it later?
I'll ask staff to give a presentation, then we'll call
And
you.
then we'll follow?
Sure.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to? Thank you, sir. All right, seeing none, I will close the public hearing for that and ask staff to come and give a report.
Sure. Thank you. So I will give a brief overview of the proposal, and then I'll let the applicant fill in a lot of color about the benefits and that kind of thing that are coming forward from that. So let me just get an image up here, and then we can go from there. Okay, this will at least get us an image to look at as we start to talk about the proposal. So what we're looking at here today is a modification of the approved development package for the Park District, commonly known as the Park District, that involves 100 West Grand, 140 West Grand, and 341 Evergreen. And this is a modification really only to Building C on Evergreen Avenue. So the original proposal consisted of buildings A, C, and D. Building A was an 11-story, 140-foot building with 2 levels of parking. Building D was a 10-story, 119.5-foot hotel for 194 rooms. Building C was originally approved in August of 2018. It was for 72 units. Which also served the purpose of our diversified housing requirement, and that's a proposed was a proposed 6-level building where 5-story building where 4 of those were residential and the first floor was parking. And had a mix of studios, 1s and 2 bedrooms. Our master plan plans for M3 in the area. That's up to 6 stories. For multifamily, residential is permitted. It's the equivalent to some of our commercial districts there. So what they're proposing to do here is to change Building C from a 5 total levels to 6 levels. They're adding 1 level on top for residential purposes. They're going from 72 units to 99 units total in that building. They're increasing the height from 52 feet to 63 feet. As such, 74 of the units will be reserved for income qualified residents, which fulfills the 25% diversified housing requirement. The Planning Commission held a public hearing in October and then took action in November with unanimous support for the project. The DDA also discussed the issue and had a split vote, but ultimately in favor of the project. There are a couple of items that I'd like to address in terms of changes to the recommended conditions of approval. Those are related to the diversified housing requirement or the affordable income qualified qualifications. So we're proposing 5 new conditions, and they deal with how to track and monitor and make sure that those units that are reserved for income qualified tenants are actually reserved as such, spread out through the building equitably and evenly, so they're not all focused on, say, the top floor or any other area, and that they're monitored correctly, and that they have to follow the MSHDA standards for income qualification. So we propose those 5 conditions. Those are in your packet. There's also one additional correction we'd like to bring to your attention that's necessary, and that refers to conditions number 19 and number 22 appear to be redundant, making reference to the required conditional rezoning that the offers or the conditions that were offered need to be amended to reflect the current site plan, and that's in progress already. So we just need to either strike one of them or clean one of them up.
Could you repeat that one more time for the
so
19 and 22?
Condition number 19 and 22 are worded differently but cover the same thing.
Yep.
Just says that the conditional rezoning has to be amended to reflect the current site plan, which we're currently doing.
And which one do you recommend? 19 seems a little like Sanskrit. 22 seems pretty clear.
Yeah, that's why I would just cut 19 then and renumber accordingly.
Awesome. Is there any questions of staff on this?
Remind me what the income level is for moderate income. Is it 80% of?
Yes.
Okay.
I've got one more question. The condition 21, in reading that, I'm not quite sure I understand what you're trying to get at with this. It says building C shall delegate a total of 25% of the combined residential units of building A and C for moderate income, 80% AMI units. Is it saying that it shall be utilized to meet the 25% rule for buildings A and C?
Yes.
Okay.
What's the square footage of this building again?
The total square footage of all floors combined, or the first floor? Oh, that I would have to defer to the architect.
Roughly?
75,000.
Another question, if I may. And again, I've got paper, I've got computer screens, so I apologize if this is a redundant question. But how does this comport with our LEED building standards for residential?
So that hasn't been evaluated yet. Of course, that would happen at the time that buildings come in for construction permits. But we haven't evaluated that at this point.
Okay. Have you had any discussion about the importance of making it meet that standard?
No, we have not.
Okay. Is that something we could do?
I would defer maybe to our legal staff to see if that's something we can require.
I do have another comment. I'm just looking at the current proposed mix of units and the updated proposed mix of units. And it seems like what we are so currently is what we would be changing it from, and proposed is what we would be changing it to, correct? So as it is currently, we've got 44 three-bedroom units in that building, and the proposal is moving to 5. That just seems like with adding so many units, I guess because when we talk about moderate income housing, the hope would be really, I think, in the back of my mind certainly, but in the back of I don't know the rest of the council, but the idea that there would be some family housing available in that area. And if you take out all the 3-bedroom units, I guess maybe I should be talking to you.
Yeah, and I think the applicant will be able to demonstrate how there are many of the 2-bedroom units. One of the bedrooms is large enough to accommodate two beds. So
Okay.
it really functions as a flex between a 2-bedroom,
Okay.
3-bed option.
Okay, I mean,
And I think the
'cause we're-
floor plan actually shows them as such. as
Okay,
well.
because we're losing 2-bedroom units too. I mean, it looks like we're gaining I don't know. All right, I guess I'll talk to the applicant. Thanks.
Are there any other questions of staff? If not, I will have I request the developer to come up.
Thank you. David Pearson, I'm for Convexity. Chris Oakley, Director of Design for Convexity, will talk about some of the specifics of design, and we'll get to the numbers on the unit mix. But I guess I want to start with what we're proposing and why.
Okay.
And how we got here was looking closer at MSHDA housing guidelines, MSHDA income guidelines, and what's the best way to build this building. And among the things that we discovered were it takes a long time to discover whether you're going to qualify for MSHDA credits or subsidies. And even then, you have maybe a 20% chance typically on even getting in after you've gone through a 12 to 18-month process. With that, Convexity determined to go ahead with an 80% AMI without any subsidies, without any credits. It's simply doing it on its own, but did look really careful at a lot of the MSHDA guidelines for design and also for how the housing should work. One of those things is that there should be more of a range of types of housing within the building itself. As approved, this was 72 units of just affordable housing. And one of the things, although without the program, Convexity's not doing below 80%, one of the important things is not to just have affordable housing, to put in market rate units as well, so that it isn't that building that I live in that's everybody knows is that building. This adds additional units, as it was 100 Grand River, now called the Abbott, or Building A, as it's known on these site plans, went from 218 units to 196 units. So the idea was to shift some here and also to increase the number of bedrooms and the size of the bedrooms. So originally there were 72 units with only a total of 90 bedrooms total. It was almost all one bedrooms and studios. In addition to adding 2- and 3-bedroom units, what MSHDA guidelines call for is anytime you have a second bedroom, it has to be big enough for 2 single beds. So the bedroom sizes were increased so that those can be used for 2 beds, so that exactly that, you can have actual families live here. The other thing that's important is to look at the actual rent and how it works. So at 80% of AMI, when you compare a studio or a 1-bedroom to what's in the market, the savings is really only about 15%. It's not as great as what you would expect. When you get to a 3-bedroom, and there's a sliding scale which includes number of occupants as well as the number of bedrooms, it's about a 40% difference. And so in order to make this really what it should be, which is to attract young families, to attract people who actually can use the affordable component of the rent, it made sense to do those things. All of that says a couple of things. Well, you need a bigger building. So each of the floors increases by 2,650 square feet. It is still within the setbacks under the zoning ordinance. It does, by going out some, mean that it goes up just 1 floor, but it does mean going up an additional floor. That still fits within your master plan for the area. I might also add, interestingly, when we came through originally, we needed a special use permit for Building C to reduce the height below what's required for the B3. This now makes it effectively the standard height without any waiver or variance from the council. That's the basic how we got here. The other part that it does do, and I think that Chris Oakley can speak to as well and show you through the design, it's a better design. It's a better looking building. It fits better on Valley Court Park, and we think just makes it a better project that's really long lasting in terms of its significance to the community, its location, and a long-term really for the developer as well. Be glad to answer any questions you have, but if I could ask Chris to walk you through the design, we could do that.
Okay, I do have a question for you first, if I can.
Yep.
I'm not quite sure I followed you in terms of the rent on this property. You're renting by unit, not by bed, correct?
Yes.
There will be no renting by bed.
Correct, but the way the MSHDA guidelines work, you have two components in determining what the rent is for each apartment. It's a combination of the number of bedrooms and the number of occupants. Those two create you figure out the rent based on that. So that's what I meant, not that you would have individual bedroom rentals.
Have you calculated your proposed rents?
Sorry, Chris Oakley, Director of Design and Convexity Properties. The rents are scheduled. MSHDA republishes essentially the HUD guidelines and all that every year. They're scheduled. I think what David's talking to, if you have a 3-bedroom unit with 5 occupants, there's actually an uptick for that extra occupant that you're kind of anticipating, of about $50 a month. So I think ultimately income is validated based on size of family, and then the rent is can either be by unit or by the number of occupants. There's a slight delta between those two. We can't really do that because we don't yet know, how many people are going to be in a given unit.
And do you anticipate that you will have unrelated individuals in multi-bedroom units?
I believe there would be, because under MSHDA guidelines and federal guidelines that is permitted. We are also understand there are limits on that under
so each one of these individuals would have to qualify?
No, I think in aggregate you qualify. So there's an income limit, but part of the certificate of qualification, or whatever they call it, is going to be all the income generated by everyone who is in that unit, whether it be 2 parents, even they're even asking for income information, for students and children, and that all kind of like rolls up to the aggregate income.
Okay.
And then
thank you.
Yeah, and essentially the rents appear to be, once you do the math, it's essentially 30% of the gross qualifying income. They go through many, many pages of a lot of information to come up to 0.3000. So.
Okay.
And I'll just kind of touch upon one kind of a half step back what David was talking about. We originally had 218 units in the Abbott, our building A. We actually pulled that down, and it came in at 195. And part of the rationale for doing that was while we were completing our documents, approvals and documents, 2 other large buildings were going up that were very 1-bedroom and studio intense. And where from the pure development and rent side, you actually get the highest dollar per square foot for the smallest units, we actually thought that was a little oversaturated. So our unit count dropped. And where we are now between our building A, the Abbott, and building C, we have a total unit count of 295. Our original approval was 290. So in aggregate, it's just a 5-unit increase. And of that 5-unit increase, once we run it through the 25%, on the diversified housing ordinance, we end up with like 3 additional units that are kind of on the market rate side. But we did, in aggregate, we reduced our studio count between both buildings by over 50 units. We increased our 1-bedrooms by 4 units. We increased our 2-bedrooms by 56 units. And then we increased our 3-bedrooms by 1 unit. And I think I've shared this with staff. This was my little cheat sheet on this, just because I think when we were in front of Plan Commission, it was not necessarily clear. But there is a kind of a bedroom count increase, and then once we look at MSHDA's requirement for every 2nd bedroom must be able to fit 2 twin beds plus a dresser plus a 4 lineal foot closet and all that. And I think we've gone beyond that. That was one of the factors that kind of upped the actual bed count in the units. Any more questions on that? Because I think this.
Could we just get a copy of that to staff? And,
yeah, for sure.
Hopefully have it put on the online agenda.
I did have a question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm misunderstanding this or if I misunderstood what Mr. Pearson was saying about the rental differences between 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms. 2-bedroom is 15% and then three
So
bedroom.
essentially, when we looked at the studio units and we looked
Right.
at what we are actually charging for a market rate product,
Okay.
if, you know, the rents for an income qualified individual in a studio unit is at the 80% AMI is about $200 and change less, only $200 and change less than what we are charging currently in the Abbott.
Okay.
So it's kind of like the least affordable on the moderate income side.
Okay.
When you jump to when you go from a studio to a 2-bedroom, you're adding about 350 square feet, and the rent's going up in aggregate less than $300.
Okay.
So again, where we as developers may make the most on a purely per square foot basis with the smaller units, I really am not convinced that they're moderately affordable, truthfully.
Right.
And the last thing that we want to do is have a studio intense building with no one living in it. You know, it doesn't serve. I don't think it serves the intended need, nor does it help us remotely.
Okay. So you guys have kind of split the difference and doubled down on 2 bedrooms, because it seems like this.
The two bedrooms with the second bedroom ability for a double occupant means a family of 4 could live there.
Right.
You know, and
A very friendly family of 4.
a very cozy family of 4. Yes,
Yes.
but it's possible nonetheless.
But they have a big park in their backyard, so that's okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. That's kind of been the process, to be honest.
Okay, well, it seemed like from what Pearson was saying, that the 3-bedroom unit was actually the most affordable in terms of that, but you've only got 5 of those units in the proposed mix. in Building
Correct.
C,
Well,
so-
and part of that reasoning is I'd have to double up on the math. Your zoning ordinance has a cap on 3-bedroom
Right,
units, and when
okay.
we run it across both projects, we're getting
Got it.
very close to it, and that's
And-
before factoring
okay.
in. We'll throw some 4s in here if you want, honestly, but you know.
I could be convinced, but there's 4 other people on council, so.
I can also.
Yeah.
Lead certification.
Yes.
And that's addressed in the development agreement. And it says the project shall be constructed in accordance with the city's green building incentive policy as adopted by Council Resolution 2009-1 as currently applied and shall meet LEED V4 standard certified level. So.
Great, thank you. I was looking at that.
Oh, okay.
Thank
the
you.
only thing that it will meet that qualified level.
That
It's
doesn't
not
have to be
required to be certified.
Yes, I believe, looking at this, yes, right?
Well,
No.
It will meet the
it
certification,
doesn't have
but
to
they
be
don't.
certified, it has to meet that level, so it could be certified. They want to save some money on the certification, actual certifications.
Were there any other questions for the developer? Any other questions for staff on this?
Yeah, I do
Yeah.
have a question. So just flashing back to our joint meeting with the DDA, whenever that joyful event was, Convexity had a proposal in for the Evergreen properties, but it was contingent on a purchase agreement. And I'm assuming that is no longer, because that would have totally taken this off the table. So I'm
Right.
assuming that Convexity is not putting in an RFP that would involve not building this building that we're about to talk about.
That decision has not fully been made, but I think what we
Okay.
do know is, based on timing, like for us to stop and wait,
Right.
for us to fully stop, submit, wait for whatever the determination is to select and all that, then we have to pretty much slow this down for a year.
Okay, and you want to,
Well, we have a team we're very happy with working on a building, and frankly, they you know, it's a very tight construction market now, and our general thought is to move them over.
you want to keep them employed so that you can keep them?
Well, yeah, exactly.
Got it.
Honestly,
Okay.
so, you know, that's still our plan. This building, we have some budgetary things we need to work through on the construction side because I'll say it's a very overheated market.
Okay.
You know, but we're still moving forward on this. That's not to say, you know, I don't know what the selection process is going to be. If the selection process is, you know, 4 or 5 months, then, you know, I think we'll be moving forward with this building. If it's a little more timely and we submit, then we probably
So
have
you
other
want,
considerations.
you want the, sort of, if this building goes ahead, regardless of what's happening there, you would like to build it in this form, and then if something else happens, then this
Yeah,
would disappear.
we originally scheduled to file for permits in February and
Okay.
start construction in April and deliver the building the following April. So
Okay.
it's not really in sync, which is why I think when we felt we had the ability to submit an LOI, because the property wasn't locked down,
Mhm.
we kind of put it in there, optimistically, I guess.
Got it.
You know,
Okay.
So.
Got it. Thanks.
So I guess we talked, do we want a quick run through of what the building actually is, or,
I like pretty pictures.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Go real fast? You're Vanna? Sure. So essentially, the Abbott, our Building A, the Graduate Hotel, Building D, and then our Evergreen parcel up here, Building C. Generally, it's a L-configured building. It's the same as what was originally, approved, a year ago, July of 18, August of 18. But it's, kind of going into a few things that we were touching upon. The floor plate expanded, which while there is no setback requirement, in the zoning district, our original plan did identify 10 feet. And we actually needed to nibble into that to get the larger floor plate. And the larger floor plate's purpose obviously was to increase the unit sizes and get more multi-bedroom units in. We're still anticipating, essentially a lay-by on Valley Court, an entry plaza. The primary entry, is kind of, here in the L. Then, kind of back overlooking the park. Evergreen Avenue, treescape, understanding that there's other discussions happening about infrastructure. And one thing that I think we had started talking about, at least with our design team, understanding that the elevation of Evergreen may change over time. We actually looked at berming up to our building so that if it were to happen 5 years and not more imminently, like seems to be the desire, we're not packing dirt against brick, that we'd have a berm set up there, so essentially the surrounding grade would rise up to that berm elevation. It's relatively tight here, but that's what our intent was. We did maintain the 10-foot setback essentially on the south side adjacent to the existing parking lot. From a planning point of view, small lobby, elevator access, access to parking off Valley Court. We have 34 parking spaces internally, and then from those parking spaces, access back into the lobby. Upper floor plate. And this is where you can actually start to see, the notion that the bays that are created on the outside, and the image is really because these bedrooms just got deeper, and that added a little bit of architectural texture to the exterior of the building. 3-bedroom unit, 2 bedrooms on the corners. A few studios that are infilled, and then the 1-bedroom units. That dispersion from talking kind of quickly. The aesthetic of the building, it's a brick base with an ephes stucco on the top 2 floors. These are the metal-clad, metal panel system at those projecting bays, where you have the 2 bedrooms coming in. The architect, kind of invested quite a bit of effort and a little bit of relief on the brick just to create more texture, starting at the base and the 2 different brick colors working up. And then, the ephes system up top is panelized with kind of some subtle shade differences. That's the entry court, and then one more. And this is a partial portion of the building looking up Valley Court, where we have kind of the foundation level planting along the base of the building. This is the parking structure. There will be some select openings in the parking structure for ventilation and probably a few, kind of smaller window panels. It really is the base of the building. And it actually kind of, if there is this elevation change, it actually means that ultimate grade ends up not getting up to where the residential floors ultimately are. That's kind of the quick high-level run-through. Any questions on that?
Just a real quick recap of what the timeline on the construction of this building is going to be.
So our original intent was that, get through these approvals this year, so that we're in a position to file for our actual full building permits in February.
Okay.
I believe our development agreement actually mandates the city gives us a 4-week turnaround on that permit submittal, which is kind of nice. It's a good thing to do. Then we'd work towards a groundbreaking probably late April, and it's a 12-month construction time frame, which would probably put the building ready for occupancy in May, probably June 1 at the latest of 2021.
Okay, awesome.
So you've got, what's your total parking spaces for this?
34. Correct.
And then I'm assuming those will be rented out separately from the
yes,
units? And then is there consideration in that, in the, your multiplier for your moderate income? Or is it expected that those parking spaces will go to the market rate apartments, or is that part of the moderate income equation?
It's whoever, honestly, whoever is willing to pay for them.
Okay.
It's not packaged in the moderate or the moderate income rent.
Okay.
And like our current building, it's totally a separate exercise.
Okay, so a moderate income renter would have to pay for an additional parking space if they want one? Okay.
You know what those rates would be at this point?
I don't right now. I know they're creeping up.
What is, George, what's our monthly parking permit rate in the
somewhere around $90 to $100, I believe, in that ballpark.
And that would be an option that would be available for those people?
There are permits available. It depends on where, but there'll be some realignment looking at that issue.
Okay.
Just, this is a steel frame building, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So I have a quick comment on your description. So we're convening a parking task force on January 9th. It's going to be our first meeting at 8 in the morning or so. And at the DDA, the conversation around parking, especially on the west side of downtown, has been fairly prevalent. I think we do need to, and I know that we're going to be probably addressing this at our next discussion-only meeting when we're talking about zoning within the downtown. But we do need to look at permits. I think that we're getting to a point where we're filling up kind of the top level ones, and we're seeing downturns in some ramps and not in others. And I want to make sure that we're doing everything as a city, that when we're providing the public parking is indicated via our policy, that we're doing that in an accessible way. And it's especially important with an RFP going out now on our evergreen properties and this project being proposed. So I just wanted to keep that in everybody's mind, that we are doing the parking task force and going to be continuing to expand on that. And I really just want to continue discussing parking in the west side of our downtown, because that is a growing area in the city. Good.
On a slightly different subject, is that
Yeah,
okay? I'm just rewinding. Is there a possibility that even if we allow this, it won't get built? Did I hear that just before we went to the presentation of the pictures and the site plans?
The only way it wouldn't, the reason it has to be built is that it's required under your development agreement and under the site plan approval for all 3 buildings, including 2 that are well underway. So in order for those to be occupied, the only way that could change is, for example, in the proposal that was made previously with a suggested letter of intent, that the city agreed to change that requirement, and under that proposal would have accepted donation of the property as a park in place of Building C. Unless the city council responded to some proposal that we made to change it, this has to be built. There's 2 reasons. One is it's required under your zoning because it's part of an approved site plan for all 3 buildings. 2, if we don't build it by May of 2023, the property is yours. So we have a rather strong incentive to build Building C under the current development agreement.
Okay. I'm sorry, I thought I heard a little contingency there when the designer, I'm sorry, Sarah, I forget your name, was speaking. So
it was the same issue because Councilmember Gregg had said, is Convexity going to respond to the RFP?
Right.
And what we're saying is we don't know, but we might. And if we did, and the city accepted it quickly and it changed to Building C, then under those terms, this might not go forward if we made such a proposal and if you accepted it.
Okay, thank you.
That's not the current plan.
Not submitting the RFP, or?
The current plan is this one.
Thank you. Well, yeah, just wanted to be sure I'm
Yes.
up on the current plan.
Could I speak to the conditions, because I have a couple of concerns? One is just specific to the wording. So condition number 2 on the second line says to ensure that residents residing within the facility meet the necessary income requirements, and that would be residents to ensure that income qualified residents, of which we're required to have 80%.
Are you talking
But-
about the additional 5?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the second one needs to say income qualified rather than simply, in other words, the market rate tenants don't have to meet
Just as a, so
the standards.
I think I understand what you're getting at. So maybe your residents are residing within the moderate income or income qualified units.
Correct.
Meet the necessary income requirements.
The
That's
other
fine. There is no motion on that.
The
right now.
other concerns are with the overall, I think 2 is worded loosely enough, but 5 presents a real issue in the sense that what we're doing is under 1 and under 2 generally, and under the development agreement, we agree that we're going to follow MISHDA's guidelines. And we understand that for the 80% MI, and that the income qualification will be done according to MISHDA's requirements, which effectively have trained management produce a certificate of qualification for each unit based on the people who are in there, excuse me, and verification of their income done by management. The concern I have with number 5, as it's worded, is I don't know if it's true. It says income verification shall be completed at the time a leasing rental application is completed to determine whether the lessees are income qualified. I didn't bring the guidelines with me, but I know that there's a specific timing issue with when you qualify and when you occupy the unit, and I don't know the wording. I'm not necessarily objecting to it. My concern is that
the timing of
we
the-
don't want to run into a conflict, and if...
Sure, go ahead.
What if this said something like income verification shall be completed by the time a lease is effective?
I think that would be fine. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure that fits with...
I'll just ask staff if there's any issues with that language. I'm getting an indication that there is not. Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, lastly on this, the other thing is it's the number 3 is very open-ended relative to fees the city may ask for payment for. I think just to validate and generate like the income certificate, there's already an initial investment that needs to be made, more so than just a credit check on a conventional lease. And then if the city's going to come, at a given time, once a year and want validation of everything, and the income certificates that are kept on file are not enough, I don't know what fees that are being referred to here.
Sure. Actually, could we get an answer for that from staff on what fees you're expecting to incur? This is staff.
Good evening. So generally, for low to moderate income housing, there's an asset management fee that occurs. So I'll give you an example. Within like the Deer Path apartments that are in East Lansing, those units, 100% of that unit is low to moderate income persons. The major managing partner in that case is Capillary Housing Partnership, but it is standard practice through MISHDA that they must hire a third party, if you will, to go in and verify. So it's checking, right? It's making absolutely certain that yes, at the beginning when someone was income verified and qualified to live in the unit, that was appropriate. But then let's say a year later, that's generally standard practice, it's having a third party go in and make certain that yes, that person still continues to be income qualified and there's no conflict of interest between the leasing agent and, the tenant, I guess I would say. So I think that is what we were referring to, was an asset management fee that would be determined by city council. Directly, I think we were considering during the next budget season that would be determined.
Understood. That makes sense to me.
Great.
I apologize, I don't quite understand. You know, an asset management fee determined by council and imposed upon us, is that we will go through a third-party verification. That's how we're gonna kind of make sure that applicants are validated. We have to do that anyway.
Sure. Is there a reasoning behind that fee being determined by the city council? Are there any requirements that authorize that, or is this more of a just kind of a check-in on our part?
Well, I think generally speaking, across sort of management companies, they have another party manage it. So in this indication, they would have the opportunity to either have their staff be trained, right, or hire a third party. It sounds to me like they're indicating they're going to hire a third party to do the income vetting at the beginning.
Right.
One or the other, which is standard, which is fine, certainly. But I think it is general precedent then to have someone else go in and make certain that everything is still in line and appropriate. So when the majority of these projects have MISTA funding, so generally the majority of these projects have someone affiliated with MISTA go in and
Sure.
income verify them. So since they're not receiving MISTA funding, we thought it would make sense for the city, right, for us to go in and monitor or hire someone to go in and monitor and determine that. It's just sort of as a form of practice.
Understood, and that would be why this would come to the city council rather than
Correct.
having the developer.
Correct,
go
because
through the
historically it might
third-party
be
process
MISTA, and
separately.
MISTA might do that, but they're not receiving MISTA funding.
Understood.
So, I mean, if that's the case, then those fees would be determined pretty specifically by our exact expenditures, right? So it's not an arbitrary number that we would make up. It would be directly related to staff time.
Correct. I think that it is current planning staff's recommendation as we go through the budget process this year, that you would identify, just as you would with like a rental housing application, that you would set a fee that would be approved as part of the budget process. And so then the developer or the applicant would know what that fee is going to be. So let's say it's $100 per unit. They would then understand that, there's a management fee affiliated with that. And yes, Councilman Gray, to your point, it's really covering the time necessary to review the file, because yes, they've been certified, but income levels can certainly change, right? 8, 9, 10 months in. So to go back in and make certain that everyone continues to be income qualified does take time, and a review of all of the application materials submitted, and for them to provide proof that that's still relevant.
So I'll have a request that if we do end up going forward with this language specifically, and if there is support of that on the council, that the developer be notified when that conversation happens
Certainly.
in our budget cycle.
Certainly.
Just because I think it's important that they are. And Councilmember Meadows, do you have a?
Just a note that, state statute requires us to establish our fees based on the actual cost of providing the service. So we're not going to be sitting here establishing a fee of $1 million a year for you. It's going to be the actual cost of performing the
I
service.
understand that, but when you look at a project that is really, really, really thin already, and if there ends up being, kind of an outlay of, like whatever, $8,000 to $10,000 to cover cost or whatever it may be, like, I guess what I'm looking for is just like a firmer number to plan for,
I think what we're looking for is, we don't know whether they're looking at $500 or $25,000. And I think what we want to do is talk to MISTA and find out what they do in terms of the verification. For any apartment, there has to be an annual income qualification. So we know that's going to happen. We know that our third-party manager is going to have to do that. We would like to understand that it's going to be verification rather than duplication of effort. That's what our concern is.
Understood. I appreciate those comments. And thank you, Amy, for coming up and answering the questions.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions of staff or the developer? Then I'll look for a motion.
Okay, I've got a motion. I'll move that we approve The modified site plan and special use permit application for the properties at 100 West Grand River Avenue, 120-140 West Grand River Avenue, and 341, 345 Evergreen Avenue for a 5-story residential building with 1 level of parking, including a mix of apartment types ranging from studios to 3-bedroom units, with the conditions recommended by the Planning Commission, with the exception of condition number 19, which should be stricken, and the renumbering of the subsequent conditions, and the addition of the 5 additional recommendations, conditions that were recommended by staff as items, as conditions 22, 23, 24, and 25, and 26. And then I have an additional
And that's
motion.
referencing the staff memo that was given
Correct.
to us
Yeah.
at the December 17th
That's correct.
meeting regarding the subject. And is there a second?
I'll second that.
Was that motion clear?
Okay, I do have an amendment then also. With regard to what would be the, would be number 23, that would be.
Could you reference the number that's on the memo?
The number on the memo, then the second
first.
item.
Yep.
That.
No, the second item under the staff recommended. Okay.
Correct.
Yep.
To add the word qualification between income and requirements, so that we're clear that this is an income qualification analysis. And that would be one motion, so that if there's a second on that. Then.
I'll make a second. Does that satisfy, and I'm looking to our city attorney on this, do you believe that that satisfies the description of monitoring just specifically those income qualified apartments, or does there need further expansion on that?
That should do it.
All right. There is a motion and a second on that amendment. Is there any discussion? This is on the amendment.
No, amendment seems great.
Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I'm going to ask that one more time.
Thank you. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That amendment passes. And now we are back to the main motion as amended. Are there any other amendments?
Yes, I got another amendment
Okay.
to the, what would be, have been number 5 on the staff recommendation to substitute the following language for the existing language, which would be, quote, income verification shall be completed by the time a lease becomes effective.
I'll make a second on that. There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That amendment passes. We are back to the motion as amended twice now. Are there any other amendments to?
Well, just in terms of what was numbered item 3 on the staff recommended memo, would it make sense to change the language of that to indicate that it was directly related to staff costs, or is that not necessary?
I think that.
As required, as dictated by state law, not to exceed actual expenditure or something like that?
It's already the law. So.
Right, so.
It doesn't hurt, but it doesn't.
It doesn't add anything, so just as determined by state law. Just so that it doesn't
you
seem
like
like
to
we're
make
being
amendment on
arbitrary.
So just add as determined by state law
Yeah.
at the end of the sentence. I'll second
Yes.
that.
Yes.
All right, that was a motion and a second on that amendment. Is it clear the item that she's referencing? Look at our city attorney. Just as a clarification, that is item 3 on the staff memo for December 17th. Is there any discussion on this item? City attorney has a.
Not the amendment, no.
Did you have something?
I got another amendment after this.
Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That amendment passes. We are back in the main motion. It's amended.
Another amendment to what would be item number 26, which is number 5 on the staff thing, as changed to add the following language. Quote, at the end of that item, that condition, and conform to the Michigan State Housing Development Authority income guidelines and procedures, unquote.
I will make a second. There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That amendment has been added. We are back to the main motion. Are there any other amendments? All right.
No.
And now we have a motion and a second on the table. Our motion is amended. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I've got a few comments. This is our first low to moderate income housing that has resulted from our diversity rule, our income diversity, housing diversity rule in the city, and I'm pretty excited about the fact that we have it. I wish it was more robust, frankly. I wish we had some 30%, some 40%, some 60% units within here, but this is a great start for us. You know, we need to encourage more diversified housing, and specifically more low to moderate income housing in the city. And you know, I give credit to Convexity for putting this forward and designing a beautiful building that can house these individuals who will be living here.
Discussion?
Yeah.
Councilmember Babcock?
What you said.
I am deeply conflicted because I very much want low to moderate income housing. I think if you work in East Lansing, you should be able to live in East Lansing. And I think a diverse community includes many economic levels, all economic levels. But I'm concerned that this is underparked. 34 spaces for 74 units is just asking for trouble. I'm concerned that the parking permits that one can purchase in the city ramps are running scarce these days. I do think the parking task force is a great idea, and I had a little discussion with Councilmember Stevens, who was very helpful, and he makes a good point that the building should be operating for the parking task force to be able to study. However, I'm also concerned that we have some other proposed developments in this area, and I just don't know how it's all going to play out. I think that looking at this for the future and for the highest and best use, we'd be in a better position if we were to coordinate the future development down there instead of doing it project by project. This really isn't project by project. It is somewhat to me simply because it predates me on council, but I just don't see how. It seems unusual to approve this tonight and then maybe you'll come back with an RFP, which maybe you'll ask to undo this. I'm sorry if that doesn't sound fair, but there's just a lot of unknowns in that section of town. So, thank you.
Can I say, it's not really responding to what you said, except in the sense of the parking. I think there is a significant need for additional parking on the west side of the city. And during the debates on the developments that were going in over the last few years, including what I'll call Park Place 1, Park Place 2, there was a more robust parking proposal that was there, and it didn't. Neither one of those got built. But I think my personal view is we need additional parking on the west side. That this isn't the last development that we're going to see there. Obviously, the DDA is marketing its properties on Evergreen. I think that's an opportunity for us possibly to provide additional parking down there, but I don't think that's the end of it. I think that we have to look at it in terms of where other likely development can take place down there. The problem with, I guess, the idea of sort of looking at it more holistically is that we don't know what the developments are going to be, so we do deal with them on a piece-by-piece basis. But recognizing that we do have more development that's going to take place there, I think we do have opportunities that are going to come up fairly soon involving that area, and that additional parking that can accommodate this, but also can accommodate better the hotel and other development that might be in that area is going to be an opportunity we're going to be taking a look at probably over the next 12 months at some point. So I think if that helps a little bit, I know I'm committed to more parking down there, and I think that we have a different view on council at this point about the amount of parking that might be required at that end of the city. So, if that helps you make a decision anyway, I'm on board for more parking down there.
If I may, through the chair?
Sure.
Yes, but what if the RFPs come back with no included parking? And we know one of our proposals is MSU FCU, which will eat up a small parking lot, take away a small number of spaces, but won't include any parking. So then we're kind of painting ourselves in a corner, if you will, and we're painting the DDA in a corner if it wants to go along with us, which it might choose differently, of having essentially a parking ramp down there. And I don't know if that's actually going to be proposed in any of the RFPs.
Well, if I can, my response to that would be, it is the DDA's property. They have put out the RFP. They will be making a recommendation to us. The decision will be here. And if there's inadequate parking, I think I can see the handwriting on the wall, and I hope developers can too.
Just really quickly, and I just wanted to note one thing really quickly. MSUFCU has not noted a site plan. However, you are correct. At this point, they've indicated that there is no parking on site, but it's not something that's formal in writing. My next kind of point
tight
is
spot,
just
so.
as the given liaison to a couple of DDA meetings so far, I will tell you that the conversation, and hopefully in an effort on my part to continue conversations between the DDA and the council and be on the same page around things. One of the reasons why I wanted a parking discussion on our discussion-only meeting agenda was because it's a huge issue for the DDA.
Absolutely.
And they talk about this fairly regularly. So I obviously, I have no idea. I can only speak for myself if I am a voting member there at the time, but I believe that is definitely a priority for the DDA to have parking, or at least the parking required to occupy whatever proposal is being done. But again, that is just me relaying what is circumstantial information based on what I believe is the opinion of the DDA.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And in my interpretation of the Evergreen RFP, I thought that there was a fairly heavy emphasis put on parking in that document. So I think that if that is one of the weighted decision-making factors, that we probably will not see an RFP that comes out with no parking. It might not have enough, but it will have some, so.
Is there any more discussion on this item? So I'd just like to say, so when I voted, one of my honestly first couple of meetings was the Park District project. When I got elected back in 2017. When I was running for office, I talked to many people throughout our community that gave me very similar responses on the need for income qualified housing or for lower rents across the board. I think that diversification of housing, the development that we've had so far, has done that naturally, but I think that we also need to be pushing as a council for more proposals like this. I was happy when this came up originally, and honestly, a mix of market rate as well as income qualified to me is a benefit. I think that it does reduce a little bit of stigma, and it also caters the conversation towards that this is viable in our downtown. We're going to be having obviously a housing study that an RFP has gone out for, where we cited income qualified housing specifically, and hopefully showing to developers or prospect the people that want to develop within the city that this is something that is a possibility, that this is something that works within our city. I think this is a really, really great thing. And I think it's something that we've needed for a very long time in East Lansing, and I hope that it won't be the last installment of lower or moderate income housing within the city. I share concerns about parking. I will be honest here. I do believe that this is going to be a very good project, but I am really excited to get working with the parking task force and with our DDA and having these conversations in public discussion only meetings around what are we going to do, because I think that we've heard from Kayla Shallow and other members of staff that we are shifting towards more permits and sometimes less people parking in those ramps temporarily. And with the housing boom downtown, I think we're going to see that trend either increase or we're going to see more leasing of those spaces. So this conversation is really important, especially on the west side, where parking ramps that might have permits might not be as accessible. So it's a big deal for me. The second thing, I would just love maybe some reach out from staff to public transportation agencies in the area, such as CATA. We are building a good amount in this area. CATA does run throughout MSU and through Lansing. Maybe there could be a conversation around, since there is a boom in housing, maybe a more accessible public transportation location in that area. I know that there are some fairly close to it, but those routes I'm not necessarily familiar with, and depending on where they go, I think that might be a conversation, especially regarding this development. I will be voting yes on this site plan because I think it's a good thing for East Lansing, and I think we need this type of housing downtown, and I'm looking forward to seeing it built.
May I ask a question? I'm sorry. What percentage of this is going to be low income, moderate? Mishta, I'm sorry, I lost track.
70 out of 90.
75% of the apartments in the building. Is that what you're referring to?
75% of 74 apartments.
No, it's 99
74.
apartments. It's
74.
99 total.
Excuse me, 74 will be moderate income qualified, and then 25 will be market rate.
Okay, thank you. I had it
99
transposed, so
total.
thank you very much. That's
What's that?
very helpful.
99 total.
99 total, correct.
Yep.
All right, is there any other discussion on this item? All right, seeing none, there's a motion as amended as well as a second. All those in favor of the motion as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Seeing none, the motion passes. Our next item on the agenda, thank you, is item 4.2, consideration of a special use permanent site plan application for the property at 115 Albert Avenue to allow the establishment of a restaurant, including alcohol sales. Who's our staff? David Haywood.
Right, thank you. Let me get back to our agenda item here. That's loading. Oh, I see it. It's too far away from me now. Bear with me here as I get this up to...
I apologize, David. This is a public hearing. I'd like to open it up for members of the public to speak on the issue before we get a staff. My apologies. Is there any member of the public that would like to speak on this issue? I'm going to ask one more time. Is there any member of the public that would like to speak on this issue?
The applicant wants to speak. This is your time. If you want to speak as the applicant, this would be your chance to speak. Yeah, if you'd like to.
We can have the applicant speak after
Either or,
the
somebody
staff,
else speak.
if necessary.
I'll give a quick overview and then you guys can come up. Okay, so just trying to get this site plan so you can see it. Apologize for. All right, here we go. Okay, so this is a proposal for a special use permit at 115 Albert Avenue. It's for a new restaurant concept to occupy the former Mena's site of the suite. It's one building, two suites. The suite to the west is Black Cat Bistro currently, and they would propose to occupy the east side of the building. It's approximately 2,700 square feet of floor space. They do propose to have seating for 115 occupants. Also an outdoor patio on Albert Avenue sidewalk with a roll top garage style door to open the front end to allow for access for patrons and servers to the outdoor seating area. They do propose to occupy or use the liquor license from the Black Cat Bistro and expand that to the proposed restaurant. However, it'll be a separate concept, separate theme, no common entrance other than the front entry. So they would operate under the same liquor license but be two separate themed restaurants. They do propose a small building addition to the back here that just encompasses a ramp for accessible entrance. Their proposed hours of operation are Sunday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 2 a.m. They anticipate having 5 to 12 employees depending on the time of day and shift. Our building department did evaluate the conceptual drawings and didn't indicate based on the floor area and seating arrangement is provided that they would cap the occupancy at 108. So the Planning Commission held a public hearing on this and took action on in November with unanimous support for the project, as well as the DDA also provided unanimous support for the project. And with that, I would take any questions.
Can you leave that
sure.
sketch up there?
Mhm.
I have a question. I've got a question about the accessibility ramp. Is there no accessibility through the front door, the Albert Street side?
I don't believe that there's a grade change here, but in order to get back to the parking, they are proposing a ramp to provide more accessibility for anyone who might park in the back area.
Are those parking spaces specific to the Black Cat and to this new restaurant?
Yes, they are.
Those will be public parking spaces? Because right now I think they've got those reserved for staff.
Yeah.
It's quite possible
See
that
them
they're
as
reserved, but they are to serve the site. But are they public spaces, or are they reserved for employees?
Reserved for staff.
They're reserved for staff.
Okay, so there really is no accessibility parking space in the back of the building anyway.
Well,
So
They show one dedicated here, but not for the public necessarily.
So I'm having trouble seeing how that ramp then serves the public who will, frequent this business. I mean, if there's no accessibility through the front.
No, I'm not sure that there isn't. I'm just saying that they are proposing a ramp so that it's more accessible in the rear. So I would let them talk about if there's any barrier at the front entry, but I'm not aware of one.
Okay.
Hi, Mark Fineout. So the front entrance is accessible, and the rear is required for exiting.
Okay, gotcha. That's it. That was
Okay, great, good. Glad we could answer it.
Really quickly, I'm going to ask one more time if there's any member of the public that would like to speak on this issue. Seeing none, I'll close that portion and I'll invite the applicant to come up. Welcome.
Good evening. Michael Brown, law firm of Carl and Edwards Brown. I'm the liquor licensing counsel for the E&G Connection, which is the owner of the Black Cat Bistro and the soon-to-be tenant of the East Side space the staff just described. The liquor license will now encompass the entire building if we get approval from the council, and otherwise the operation will remain the same under the same ownership. The same chef who is here tonight with us, same general manager of the restaurant who's here with us. They are developing a separate menu concept to sort of diversify the food options available at that location, and also to diversify the price point available at that location. And really, this is an opportunity that's been presented to us from the building landlord to expand the operation of the Black Cat Bistro, which so far has been, I think we'd all agree, very successful and a nice addition to the downtown East Lansing dining scene. Mm-hmm. And this is an opportunity to sort of leverage that quality that the Black Cat Bistro provides and do it in a new and unique concept for this area. So I'm here just in case you have any questions about the operation of the liquor license. Otherwise, if you have questions about the operation of the restaurant, as I say, we do have the chef and the general manager here with us. And then obviously you've already heard from Mark, who can answer any of your sort of technical questions about the design proposal. Thank you.
Are there any questions of the owner?
I mean, that's legal to take a license and just expand it to another business. I'm assuming there will be an overarching business that manages both restaurants so that the license can, I don't know.
Right. We will have to file an application with the Michigan Liquor Control Commission to do what we call an ad space. So we cannot actually use the new space until we not only get approval here, but approval from the state of Michigan. And so as soon as we conclude this process with you, we will file that application. And then because it is contiguous space, in other words, you can get from one side of the building to the other side without having to go outside, mm-hmm. and that would be through the vestibule in the front part of the building. Mm-hmm. That's what allows us to use one license in what is sort of being considered two spaces. It's really going to be all one space by the time we're done here, because it's all owned by the same landlord and will have the same tenant, E&G Connection, which is the tenant right now on the Black Cat Bistro side. So because of the common ownership of the building, because of the common tenancy, that's what allows the liquor license to sort of expand to the use of the whole building, because it's possible to get from one section of the building to the other without going outside.
So I guess this might be a floor plan question, but right now the entrance to Black Cat is on the corner, and I just, having patronized the business that was there before, are you opening up a new door into Black Cat on that corner so that vestibule joins? Or was it existing?
It's existing.
Oh,
and that's just the exit too.
Okay. No, it's just, I didn't see it because it wasn't being used.
Right.
Got it.
Yep.
Actually, don't sit down. I got a question for you about the patio, which seems pretty restricted, and I'm thinking about the width of the sidewalk at that location, but what is the occupancy of that patio projected to be?
6.
6? Okay. All right. That means 3 two-tops or something like that, right? Okay.
Exactly what it's going to be. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any more questions of the applicant? Okay. I had, so the patio is one of my questions on this. Besides that, I didn't see any issue with this. If it's anything like the food you guys are cooking at Black Cat, I'm sure it'll be great. But I'll look for a motion.
I'll move, go ahead.
Go ahead, I'll second.
I'll move approval of the special use permit with the 22 conditions that were recommended by staff and the planning commission.
Second.
All right, seeing a motion and a second, is there any discussion?
I just want to comment on one thing. I know there's been a little bit of an issue about the idea of expanding using a single liquor license, but if you think about the growth of Beggars, for instance. Beggars is now 3 times the size as it originally was when it obtained its liquor license. It first bought the room next to it and then expanded all the way, sort of all the way down the block as time went on. So this is not that unusual for somebody to do this.
Two unique, business identities is what was really my question.
Yeah, we had this happen on Grand River at one time too. Michelangelo's was originally just an Italian restaurant. Then it created one that was more price conscious directly next to it and had a door between it, and that was also a single liquor license that was used for that. So.
Right now, you're really dating yourself, though.
Yeah, well, I am an old guy, so I remember all these. So.
Could I ask our city attorney to comment on that matter?
Sorry, I just do have a point that I want to draw here. I think there should be an additional condition that they apply for an annual right-of-way license permit to use that outdoor space to make sure that we're not giving it away as part of a site plan, that it's actually something that they have to apply for every year like the rest of them.
That's a good catch, and I'll make that motion.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion, the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That amendment is passed. Here, back to the main motion as amended. Thank you, City Attorney, for that comment. Is there any more discussion on this item?
No. What's your timeline? Just curious, not related to the discussion.
Well, we got about 30 days to develop the plans and then 2 weeks of permitting and then start construction. So hopefully spring, midsummer.
Cool.
Awesome. My only comment is I wish you the best of luck. I'm glad to see an expansion of a great business within the city. And I think this will go well with what our new landscape is. So thank you guys for coming here. There is a motion as amended on the table as well as a second. All those in favor of the motion as amended signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Seeing none, the motion passes. And we are on to our next item, which as well is a public hearing in consideration of Ordinance 1431, an ordinance to amend the zoning use district map of Chapter 50 zoning of the Code of the City of East Lansing to rezone the northeast corner of Hazlitt and Park Lake Roads from RA residential agriculture to B2 retail sales business. This is a public hearing, so if any member of the public does want to come up and talk about this issue, now is your time to do so. I will ask one more time if any member of the public would like to comment on item number. There we go.
Hello there. I'm Jared Roberts. I'm an attorney at Frazier Trebilcock here in Lansing. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Coda Dost. He is here with us today. We understand the situation with the Meridian Township and the Intergovernmental Services Agreement. Really what we're here to do today, because you also, I assume, hear from the planning staff, chances are the city doesn't want to approve us for commercial, even though it appears that, of course, the Planning Commission was in favor of it. The city appears to be thinking that the area is moving in that direction. And I'll also note in the planning packet, this guy here, this is where our client sits. This is the Costco, and apparently only Costco-related applicants are allowed to have commercial zoning in this area, according to Meridian Township. And all I ask is that when we return with a specific user, and more information for you, that you give this property owner consideration, because again, keep in mind, the Costco to the north, there's commercial outlet directly to the north, there's a gas station directly to the north. This East Lansing property owner, by way of annexation, is in essence being sacrificed as a buffer for other undeveloped residential land that in all likelihood they're just holding to wait to develop into something else as well. And of course, I think there's a Holiday Inn coming in across the street. And again, I believe the remedy for Meridian Township, if you approve this application to B2, would be the unfortunate situation where they would take East Lansing to court. So, we have no defense on that issue. But we did want to thank you for your consideration, and that's just the way this application came before you at this time.
I understand that. I appreciate you coming and commenting. Is there any other member of the public, or is there any questions for the gentleman up here? We will get a staff explanation of this as well. All right.
Yeah.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to comment?
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you. I'm going to ask one more time. Is there any other members of the public that would like to comment on this issue? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing on this and ask our staff resource to come up and give an explanation. This is kind of a weird one, so.
Certainly is. Thank you. But we're glad to work on it and try to fill everyone in on the specifics. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what was just discussed. So we received a request for rezoning, and our standard process is to, of course, introduce that by council, move it through the Planning Commission for public hearing, comment, and bring it to council for public hearing. In which we did, and the Planning Commission looked at that. Our master plan looks at this as a future land use C2 category, which is equivalent to the district that they were requesting, which is B2. And everything kind of seemed to be pointing in the direction of moving this forward. The Planning Commission is favorable to the request. However, during the process of doing our fine grain, crossing our T's and dotting our I's, it was brought up that this is in that urban cooperation agreement area. And the nuances of that agreement are quite specific, and which limit any rezonings to mostly residential, with the exception of properties in that zone could be rezoned to a B2, except with the condition that it be for a Costco retailer. And I'm not sure why. I'm not sure if in the past that it was contemplated that that use would go that far south or what. I don't know why, but unfortunately that agreement is in place, and our assessment is that if we were to make a recommendation contrary to the agreement, of course we would be in violation of that agreement. So staff's opinion is that it kind of ties our hands, and our recommendation, of course, not to be contrary to a legally entered agreements such that we have. So that's kind of the situation. The township has weighed in on this, and their preference is to keep it residential.
And just so the staff's recommendation is denying the request.
Correct, on the basis that it would be in violation of the agreement.
Understood. Councilmember Meadows?
When we amended the agreement to allow for B2 for Costco, did we limit it to the actual property that Costco was acquiring?
We amended it to say that no other B2 use could go in there unless it was Costco related. So it was for the entire 108 area, but we did, in order to get them to put the Costco in, they had some hesitations that we were planning something, I think, beyond a Costco and opening the whole thing up. So we limited it at that time to Costco and Costco-related uses.
Just 1 second. Sir, would you mind filling out a blue card? You spoke at the podium beforehand. Go ahead.
Because I wasn't part of that discussion, when you say they, are you talking about Meridian Township?
Yes.
Okay.
The original 108 would have precluded Costco from going in as it stood. It needed to be amended. So in negotiations with them, we amended the 108 agreement. They had concerns that it was for more than just a Costco, so we limited it to Costco and Costco-related uses. Or they limited it when we changed it. It could still be a B4, however, correct?
Yeah, there are some other allowances, B4 up to, I think, 10% of the zoned area, or of the area However, I think a lot of the wetland, the conservation area behind Costco is B4, and that may have already taken up that 10%. But then there are other residential zoning districts, I think 4 or 5 of our residential zoning districts that it could be zoned to. So it doesn't completely close the door on development on the property, but to get to that commercial use, it is appears to be a barrier.
Not that I don't know my zoning districts, but remind me what B4 is.
B4 is restricted office.
Okay, thank you. I don't.
Okay, that's why we're here.
Are there any other questions of staff on this item? All right, seeing none, I will make a motion to approve ordinance 1431. Waiting for.
I'll second that.
And I will speak to my motion. I will be voting against this, as is concurrent with staff's recommendation. I appreciate the applicant coming out, but I think based on that discussion and our agreement with Meridian Township, we cannot move forward with this. That is about it. Is there any other discussion on the item?
Yeah, I'm going to be voting yes on this motion for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think that may send a message to Meridian Township that there is support on the city council for the rezoning of this property as requested by the applicant. And I haven't had a chance to actually review everything that we've did with regard to the Costco property. So I can't see a valid reason that this can't be, other than disagreement with Meridian Township, that this shouldn't be rezoned for commercial uses, and particularly retail uses if necessary. That's exactly what we're putting in there. We've approved it all through there, and it's consistent and adjacent to city-owned property and city property, is property in the city that we've taken some pretty strong steps in rezoning to B2 so that we can go forward with that. And it meets our comprehensive plan requirement. Obviously, there's been a lot of time spent by our planning commission in developing the comprehensive plan, which was adopted just recently. And for all of those reasons, I'm going to vote yes.
Just as a response to that, I also don't disagree with this type of rezoning. I think with the potential legal ramifications, and the fact that the applicant was here and indicated that there might be this might be on our agenda in the future, that I feel comfortable voting no, even though I might not inherently disagree with the rezoning itself. So,
Same as Aaron, I don't disagree with the rezoning, but I'm lawsuit averse, so I'm going to vote no.
Councilmember Babcock, you have anything?
I've always supported full employment for attorneys, but that could be just me.
Was that the only comment? It's good to have that on record.
I'm tossing a coin mentally because there's just something icky about the prohibition. And so a tie fails, right? Okay. Good to know.
We'll find
So
out.
there's a motion, and there has been a second. You know what? I'm gonna just ask our city attorney really quickly to run through what the potential legal ramifications would be in this kind of situation.
Well, the agreement was part of the land transfer agreement. If I was them, I'd argue if we violated that, the land doesn't transfer and goes back to them, which would be a significant consequence to the city. So the other things they could do is they could sue for some type of injunctive relief to preclude this decision as being unlawful if it was approved. There's a number of other litigation that they could invest in, but my biggest concern would be that we violated the land transfer agreement, and therefore the land doesn't transfer.
Understood. I thank you for that. So there's a motion and a second on the table.
Let me just say one thing. Just sort of the history here. I mean, the reason this is structured in the way it was structured is because this was a very contentious attempt to annex property into the city of East Lansing. The owner of the golf course there moved his nephew into a trailer, and they filed the application. So we were trying to keep peace with Meridian Township, and so they have more influence over what happens there than we would have in a 425 agreement. I think this is a Section 108 agreement, and so it's a little bit different. And with you, looking back on it, I wish we could have avoided this, but at the time, it kind of made sense to do it this way.
Is there any other discussion on this? All right, seeing none, we have a motion on the table. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Aye. The motion fails. Our next item on the agenda is the business agenda. Item 5.1, consideration of a fiscal year 2020 budget amendment, various funds, the combined amount of $760,000, and a revision to the fee schedule. So.
Very brief budget amendment for once.
Awesome.
So we got some good news earlier this month. We got our annual PA 289 money, and it came in about $680,000 more than we were expecting. So we'd like to use about $600,000 of that for a supplemental pension payment for public safety divisions. And then we also had some projects come up this year for some improvements to city facilities that we wanted to include in the budget amendment. Council has approved one of the projects, I think last month, and then one is coming up next month. So we've got Hannah repairs and then Orchard Street pump house repairs.
Are there any questions of staff on this item?
So moved.
Second. There is a motion by Councilmember Meadows, second by Councilmember Gregg. I'll start out by saying it's a good thing to continue to invest in our pension system. PA 289 is something that we've obviously discussed a lot, especially in regards to services rendered to MSU and our costs related to that. I'm glad to see that this number was in fact increased to something. Obviously, very happy that our finance staff is always conservative with estimates, and I will always be thankful for that. But there was an indication that this number might have been higher during our budget cycle, and I'm glad to see that it was, and that we're using it for a good purpose. So, yeah.
And I'll just say that I'm happy that $600,000 is going into the pension system, which brings us to how much under this budget?
$8 million for the calendar year.
For the calendar year, okay.
It's, I know that, we keep updating the chart.
This is a supplemental
Yes.
amount, so the total supplemental should be
It's gonna
at
be more.
almost $5 million.
We have $1
at this
million that we'll be paying before the end of the fiscal year out of the income tax fund, but that is not included in this because that's already been allocated by council. So we can have that report to council this week.
I would like to
show
know the total that
information.
we're putting in,
Yes.
because I know that in the budget,
Yes.
I thought we had 4.5. This would bring us to 5 or over 5, and
will
that
get
is
that
the target we should always be looking for. So, thank you.
Thank you for that. I will look for a motion on the item.
I'll move that. Second.
Oh, you know what? We already had my bad. We already had a motion.
We're so
by-
excited we moved it.
There's a motion on the table. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Seeing none, that motion passes. We are now on to item 5.2, consideration of a modified special use permit and site plan request from Biersbach Development LLC for a one-story, 9,461 square foot office building with 34 parking spaces at 1525 Water Tower Place.
Thank you. This is a proposal to build the 7th building in this office park. This is the Water Tower Place office condominium, and they're proposing their 7th building, and it's the total development is a 10-acre parcel, and And so dial back to the beginning. So in 2004, that's when the overall development was approved for the 7 buildings, each building ranging from 9,000 square feet to 22,000 square feet. And in 2005, the subject building, the 7th building at 1525, was modified for a 3-story bank with a drive-through. That was never built. Fast forward to 2019. Essentially what they're doing is going back to that similar 7th 1-story office building proposal. Normally, we would have approved and processed this as a site plan application administratively, but because there was a modification in 2005, and now they're proposing a building that's slightly different but very similar, we wanted to make sure that council was aware of this and on the same page as staff. So as a courtesy, we brought this to staff, or to the council for approval. So they're proposing a 9,400 square foot building with 34 parking spaces on approximately a half acre.
So so the reason why this didn't go through the planning commission was because originally this would have been handled administratively?
Correct. And the special use permit site plan process allows what otherwise is consistent with the administrative approval process and consistent with ordinances can be brought directly to council for amendments.
Okay, understood. Are there any questions, staff?
Just quick, so the intended use is essentially the same as what's already happening up there. It's just
correct.
Offices
it's just an
that
expansion
are, okay,
of the office park.
got it.
Yep.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, I'll invite the applicant up as well, just to see if there's any questions from council for them.
Good evening, David Pearson on behalf of MBE Elite.
And everybody else?
There were a couple more in between.
Yeah.
Although I was interested to discover in the council packet reference to minutes from 2004 when
yes,
both Mr. Meadows and I were here at the time. Still.
Great.
Yes. We were in knee pants then. In any event, the applicant is the tenant, intended tenant for their development and property management business. What you have before you is simply Unit 7 of the condominium. That's the only proposed use, is an office use. As Mr. Haywood mentioned, this was approved for a bank with a drive-through in 2005, but they mistakenly went up the road and built it much farther north. So, Mercantile Bank. I guess the only question I wanted to make sure of is I don't have with your staff report any conditions. So I would want
1
to.
through 6 from this. Oh, no, those are the criteria.
I would kind of guess that the existing conditions on the property would apply.
That's
to
what I
any
assumed
addition.
was the case, but I got up and hesitate because I wanted to make sure, to be perfectly honest, that I hadn't.
All right, Dave, you come back up.
I'm sorry, if I can take a minute. 7:50. Thanks. I'm sorry, I had reviewed those and did not have any issues with them, and now I've broken the attorney's computer. So, thank you for your patience, I appreciate it.
We'll send you a bill on this. All right.
If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them, but I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, so the reason why that the bank was not built originally is because they went up the road?
Actually, they did not build for quite some time.
Yeah.
They ended up building up by where the MSU Federal Credit Union built, they, of course, have now recognized their error and are coming to downtown East Lansing. So we may hope that Mercantile Bank will likewise learn a lesson and come closer to downtown.
Thank you.
So, thanks.
I appreciate that. So is there a motion on the item?
I'll move it, sure.
Second.
Okay, so I believe staff had a specified motion outlined in their memo. In the matter here, in the matter of the request from Biersbach Development LLC to modify the approved special use permanent site application to construct an office condominium on a 10.4 acre property on 3208 West Road, the development will consist of 7 buildings total, ranging in size from 9,461 square feet to 22,176 square feet, containing a total of 94,248 square feet of the floor area. 6 buildings proposed to be 1-story high, and 1 building proposed to be 2-story highs. Parking for the 347 vehicles total will be provided. Access to the site is provided from both West Road and Coolidge Road. Is that the motion that you were making?
It is. Or actually, no, it's the
Yeah,
motion I was seconding.
totally,
That's the motion
totally.
she was making.
And
exactly
that
what
is
the
a motion on the
ordinance.
entire project. That was indicated in the staff memo that that is what we should take action on. Is that correct? Subject to the, I apologize, subject to the 17 outlined conditions. 12. Oh, 12, my bad. Oh, I said, yeah. 12 outlined conditions. Is that your motion?
Yes, so moved.
Still
And I will
seconded.
verify with the second, yeah. Is there any discussion on this item? Was that clear in the motion? Understood. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Seeing none, the motion has passed. And
Can I ask one question now that we're in the end of the meeting of Tom?
Sure.
Thanks. I want to go back to the zoning request that we turned down. Could they have asked for conditional rezoning, and would that have violated the agreement?
No, it only violates it if Meridian doesn't approve it.
And could we have conditioned that rezoning request upon a Meridian Township approval?
You know, I'd have to read the agreement again. I think that might be in violation of the.
Because I'm looking at the approval, the amendment
The
to
108?
the agreement at this point is kind of fluffy in terms of where the B2 is and where it can be. So I don't want to revisit it, but if you can get some information, I'd appreciate it.
I'll do that.
Okay, thanks.
that is the agenda. So we are adjourned. Thank you for coming, everybody.